What's up, DBacks fans and fans of baseball? Welcome to our podcast. We're calling it Sneks on Deck. We came up with
It's a working title.
We came up with that in Chili's like an hour ago.
Yeah, working title.
So
essentially, I'll break down what this podcast is about. We see there's some general baseball-wide podcasts starting up, and we thought that was a cool idea. So we're making one specifically about the Diamondbacks. If you're not a Diamondbacks fan, that's totally fine. Enjoy the ride, and hey, maybe you'll find your new favorite player, like Tim LeCastro.
Ooh, Timmy Lowe.
Yeah. So, how are we starting?
So we're going to start out with kind of a broad overview. We're going to start out with a overview of what we think the Diamondbacks should do this offseason, and then we're going to go into a little more detail, talk about specific positions. What are some of the positions that we need to address this offseason?
For me, I think the biggest thing we need to address is outfield. I think our outfield is overall pretty weak. Yes, we have Marte in the outfield, and we, of course, have Gold Glove winner David Peralta. But other than those two, we haven't had any consistently playing players other than Steven Souza, who has been hurt for the last 2 years.
Yeah, Steven Souza is arbitration eligible this year. I think he's looked to make a little over $4 million. But he, like you said, he hasn't played since 2018. And even then, I'm pretty sure he only played like 70 games. And he did not do well. I'm pretty sure his average was about 211. So despite his really good 2017 that got him the contract that got him in Arizona in the first place, he has yet to reproduce those numbers. What did he look like in 2017?
2017
with the Rays.
He had an OPS of 810. He hit 30 home runs, 78 RBIs, with an average of only 240.
But pretty productive overall. I mean, if you're looking for someone that's projecting for power.
We're looking for a power bat in the outfield. He came in 2018. He played 70 games, hit 5 home runs with a paltry OPS of 678.
Oh, jeez.
I mean, now I can't fully blame him. He started the season hurt, and he came in part of the way through the season, and it's rough to start, but then he hurt himself at the beginning of the 2019 season also, like in spring training.
Yeah.
And that hurt our outfield a lot.
Look, I think Steven Souza seems like a really good guy, so I just want to say that at the outset, that I think he's probably a great guy, and I hope that he continues his career. But I wouldn't be too surprised if he does not play on the Diamondbacks this year. I think some other people have also come to that conclusion that is likely he's not going to be on the Diamondbacks in 2020. What are some other positions we got to look at, though? We also have to look at center field. We got Marte playing very good center field this past season.
Despite it being his first season playing anywhere out of the infield. It's incredible how well he played in center field. However,
now he's really emerged as a great hitter, too, and center field is, as we have learned in the past with our good old buddy A.J. Pollock, it's an injury-prone position, and I have a feeling that they're going to try to move him to second base if they can to keep him from injuring himself.
He hurt himself at the end of the season last year.
He did.
It would be beneficial to the D-backs to keep him in the infield if possible. Maybe play outfield in, I don't know, like specific games, but generally keep him in the infield. Arguable, but the free agent market doesn't seem as strong this year as it has been in years past. Like, there's been, especially if you look at 2018, it was one of the strongest free agent markets we've seen in a long time. But this year, the pickings is mighty slim.
Yeah, other than the top 15, 20 free agents, there's not a lot going on past that. I mean, if you look at like MLB.com, the number one center fielder on there, I'm pretty sure is Dyson, who put up like a little over 1 WAR maybe this year.
Yeah, it was like 1.5.
1.5.
And I mean, he's a great defender. he's a decent bat, but as you Diamondbacks fans know, he's not the starting center fielder that you can rely on for years to come. He's also relatively old.
I think he's going to be 34 next year, or maybe 35. So, other things that the Diamondbacks could do this offseason, before we get into more detail, a couple things that the Diamondbacks could do this offseason, something I would suggest personally, is we have a couple aging prospects, some guys that have shown promise but haven't really slotted well into the team. I'm thinking guys like Kevin Crone, Ildemar Vargas, possibly Taylor Clark.
Domingo Leyba?
Domingo
he's younger.
He's
You're
a little
right.
younger. He's like 20.
You're
Going to be 24, I think. I think Leyba could arguably be going for a spot this year, at least as a utility player. But I think especially those three guys who are all, I think, between 27 and 29 now, all those guys are at least backup quality on a lot of teams. And I think for Kevin Crone, he could be a DH for a team. And I think especially for us with like Seth Beer potentially being a guy that we use as a bench bat or even as a corner outfielder or first baseman next year, a guy like Kevin Crone might not be quite as useful to us as he would be to other teams. And I think I kind of feel the same way about Ildemar Vargas. He could be a good utility infielder for us, but I don't really see him taking a starting role.
Especially when we already have a very strong infield, especially with Escobar and Marte having such breakout seasons last year, and of course, the always sturdy Nick Ahmed. We don't need somebody to consistently be a backup infielder. Like, it's always good to have in case someone gets injured, but I don't think Vargas is the type of player we are in need of right now. And he's played relatively well in the MLB. He could fetch at least a good prospect if he were to be traded.
But another thing to think about is that we also have one of our top prospects, which is Geraldo Perdomo, who's pretty highly regarded as a good defensive infielder, is going to be coming up in a couple of years. And because of that, I think that's just another reason to potentially move on from a couple of our older infield prospects especially. One more thing with the overview of the Diamondbacks for this year is I expect them to hold on to a few pieces that maybe they might not normally to use as trade chips at the trade deadline this year. Because getting back to kind of our overview of the Diamondbacks, my guess is the Diamondbacks are not going to go all in this year. I would be very surprised, and it doesn't seem like they are yet. If they do go all in, they could be messing up the next couple years, and they have a lot of good prospects coming up in the next 3 to 4 years especially. So my guess is if they're going for a 90-win season next year, it probably makes sense to keep a couple of these guys, and then at the trade deadline either trade up and be buyers with some of these guys, or trade down and try to get some prospects for some of these guys and give them to contenders who just need even a tiny bit of help. And Matt Andriese is one of the guys I could see doing that. I could also see that with Steven Souza. Jake Lamb is another one potentially if they're willing to take that risk on him. But if he has an abysmal season, then his trade value is basically nothing. And that's the risk with those two guys.
I would, again, going over it, I would pull on the risk for Souza, but not for Lamb.
So moving on to our breakdown, we're going to go around the horn. We're going to talk about specific positions and talk about the players that we currently have, and then also what kind of free agents we could go after or what kind of trades we might make. So starting pitcher, who are locks right now in the rotation for you?
For me, if I had to make a 5-man rotation right now, it's really difficult considering we have a few pitchers back that we didn't have for all of or very much of last year. We have Taijuan Walker, who was out all of 2019, and Luke Weaver, who pitched fantastic for the DBacks while he was healthy, and then he got hurt. It makes it very difficult.
Well, I think if we make no roster moves, to me, there's two pitchers who are deadlocks for the rotation, which is Robbie Ray and Zach Gallen.
Absolutely.
If Ray is still in the Diamondbacks in 2020, there's no doubt in my mind he's going to start on opening day.
Absolutely.
Then Zach Gallen, who they shut him down, I think, at the end of the season
To preserve his arm.
But he stayed healthy and he pitched really
Very well. Another option for the second starting spot is Alex Young. He pitched quite well for the Diamondbacks, especially in the beginning of the season. And he was kind of a random call-up. He was one of the many long relievers / starting pitchers who we just brought up, and he pitched really well in the MLB. With those options in front of me, though, I might have to go with Luke Weaver as my second starter.
And this is where things get kind of hairy, is though we kind of have a logjam at the end of the rotation. For me,
Absolutely.
we got two players who are kind of on their going to be starting their second leg of their career in Mike Leake and Merrill Kelly. Now, Merrill Kelly was a rookie last year, but he is going to be 31 next year, or maybe 30 this year. 31 next year. And he's making about $2.5 million, or no, he's making $3 million next year. He had decent stuff sometimes, and sometimes he had very mediocre stuff. His ERA was like 4.4, but his ERA plus, I think, turned out to be 101. So overall, he's technically above average. And for the price for a starting pitcher who was healthy all season, he is a solid option as a fifth starter. But in addition to Mike Leake and Merrill Kelly, we also have Alex Young. We also have Taijuan Walker. And, I mean, even deeper into that, we also have potentially John DePlantier.
Taylor Clark.
He
started some games for us. Like, there absolutely is a logjam. I think our first three starters aren't too difficult, but I absolutely agree. There's a lot of starters with potential, and I usually subscribe to the Diamondbacks' style of preserve your young players, but I think for the 2020 season, Mike Leake should be one of your starters. He's a veteran, and we don't have any veterans in the starting rotation anymore. We obviously had Zach Greinke for a long time, but after he was traded, Robbie Ray is our most experienced starter.
And he's only going to be 28 next year?
Yeah. I mean, now you could argue that Merrill Kelly is more experienced, but if you're talking about MLB experience.
So now moving on to relief pitching, just a brief stint on that. So we got some people who, in my opinion, are kind of the locks in the bullpen. Based on last season, we got Archie Bradley. I think they hand him the closer role full-time next year.
Absolutely.
Of course, coming in halfway through the season doesn't prove as much as, taking a whole season as the closer. But the second half of the season, he looked very comfortable, and I want to see him, given the chance, especially in a season where we're not necessarily trying for a World Series right now. Give him the chance. Archie Bradley deserves it, and he's still young. He still has a lot to learn, but that means he also has so much further that he can grow. You also got Yohan Lopez, who had pretty decent numbers last year, was pretty consistent. For the first half, was our most consistent reliever.
Yeah, he struggled a little bit in the second half, but overall, I think he proved himself to be pretty consistently good.
Yeah, but speaking of the second half, Ginkel was incredible in the second half, and I would be amazed if he did not get a chance next year to help bolster that sort of back end part of the bullpen. And then, of course, Chafin as our sort of lefty specialist and just overall sexy man.
Oh, of course.
I also have some guys I have in the maybe category. I think all three of these guys will at least be given a chance next year, but will probably all be on somewhat short leashes, and that's Jimmy Sherfy, Stefan Crichton, and Silvino Braccio, who will be coming back from Tommy John surgery, who maybe not be in early in the season, but at least by partway through the season, I expect to be given a shot. He was lights out in 2018.
Yeah.
And next, I also have some guys that I have an idea. I have a proposition for potentially what we could be doing long relief-wise. I think it would be interesting to see John Duplantier as one of our long relievers, but also to have a second long reliever in Alex Young, at least at first. And I know protect young arms and maybe getting them starts in AAA could be more useful for them, but I think if they kind of split time as doing long relief and middle relief stuff, that gives you another lefty out of the pen in Alex Young. And John Duplantier showed last year that he was most effective as a reliever. And with some of his injury issues in the past, he is someone that could potentially be moving to the bullpen anyway. Also, I don't necessarily expect him to win a starting rotation spot next year.
Now, this is a bit cynical of me, but I unfortunately see a little bit in Alex Young that I saw out of Zach Godley, where he had a great first season for the Diamondbacks as a rookie, and then over the offseason he just got figured out and he couldn't be as effective as he was before. So I think because of that, I totally agree. I think having him in the bullpen would be a great way for him to tighten up his stuff, become more consistent, more used to MLB bats in a long relief role, so he's not getting as much attention, and it gives him a chance to build up his ability. Maybe he could be one of our starters a few years down the road.
Or potentially, if a spot does open up, if he gets a chance to prove himself more from the bullpen at the MLB level, then he could be one of the first people they move into that role, especially if Lovullo decides that he wants to put another lefty in the rotation.
Yeah, because that is something to think about. Right now, if the rotation that we have discussed were to go into effect, that's only one lefty in the rotation, which isn't a death sentence, but it just means that depending on the team you're facing, you can be at a disadvantage.
All right, so moving on from pitching, we're going to go to catching. Now, I don't think we need to say too much about Carson Kelly. Obviously, he had a pretty great season last year as his first full season behind the plate.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he showed that he has some power. He can hit for somewhat decent average, especially for a catcher, and obviously he was great behind the plate. And I expect him only to get more playing time and to keep improving this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think Carson Kelly will definitely be our first starting catcher. Now, after getting Stephen Vogt, I think that is a great counter to Carson Kelly. I think part of the idea behind getting Vogt is they're hoping he'll be what Avila was supposed to be, to put it lightly. Alex Avila seemed to definitely underperform to what the Diamondbacks were hoping he would, especially in 2018. He did better in 2019, but he did not have a great season. So I have some comparisons between Vogt and Avila. Alex Avila is a better defender behind the plate than Stephen Vogt is. He catches more people stealing. He overall seems to have a better arm, make less errors, and he has allowed less defensive runs, or he has saved more defensive runs. That being said, his bat was where he clearly had some issues, and Stephen Vogt makes up for that. He, in 2019, had an OPS of 804, batting average of 263. He only hit 10 home runs and 40 RBIs, but that was in less than 300 plate appearances, less than about 250 at-bats. He should be a good counter to Carson Kelly also because he is a left-handed bat behind the plate. Like it's all. I think Stephen Vogt was a great pickup, and he could be what we were hoping to get out of Avila if he can keep up what he did last year.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's a good signing, especially because Caleb Joseph, who is another option, clearly offensively was not a great fit for the Diamondbacks, and is another aging player that is probably past the point where he's going to get much better. But speaking of young players who are probably going to get much better, we have another player who could end up being a catcher on the Diamondbacks coming up, and potentially even next year, which is Dalton Varsho. Dalton Varsho is one of our top prospects right now. Depending on where you look, he's pretty much always put in our top 5 top prospects right now. He's a catcher, but he also has some great speed, which means potentially utility player to play outfield or even maybe middle or second base, middle infield at some point. Jake, didn't you get the chance to see Varsho?
Yes, I did. Got to see him play in a game over the summer, and he was incredible. One, I think he went 2 for 3 over the night, so he hit well, but he was so fast. He made it from first to third on a single to right field, like, easily. He has great speed. He had a great pop-up when someone was attempting to steal. And I think Carson Kelly may be given a run for his money in the next few years. But, as John said, even if, let's say, Carson Kelly blows up and has a great season and Varsho comes up, he has the speed and he has some experience playing corner outfield. I think that could be his future.
I would not be too surprised if they brought up Varsho later on in the season in 2020, gave him some chances behind the plate, but also gave him some chances in the outfield. Just see how he does versus MLB pitching, because of course you never know. Varsho could be an option to play as sort of a secondary catcher / outfielder, and especially because he's also a lefty bat, which gives him just another way that he could counter Carson Kelly and potentially fill in for some of his weaknesses. Speaking of positions, I'm not really worried about first base. Christian Walker had a really good season.
Yeah, both offensively and defensively. He got a Gold Glove nomination, which I think is a great way to show that although Paul Goldschmidt is dearly missed by all DBacks fans, I'm sure, Christian Walker has a lot more potential than a lot of people thought, including myself. I was very skeptical of Christian Walker. I was like, he's a big guy who can hit far home runs, because that's what he did in 2017, 2018. But then he came into 2019 needing to prove himself, and he blew people away, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. At first thinking that he was going to platoon with Lamb, and if it sounds crazy now, if we said that Christian Walker was going to become our full-time first baseman, I think people would have just laughed. I probably would have laughed at you. I mean, at the end of the season, he came out with 2.8 bWAR. His OPS was 111. His OPS plus was 111. He hit 29 home runs, and his OPS was 825, slugged 476. He, especially if you include his defense, had a really good season. I don't think Christian Walker has any competition for first base right now, at least not in the starting role.
Second base, Ketel Marte. All right, so third base.
Well, actually, I do have something I want to say about second base. Okay. So second base, man, I need to do a little stretch. So this is the position we hope Ketel Marte is playing in 2020. However, if he doesn't play second base, there are a few ways he could not end up playing second base. One is if somehow, for some reason, we get a third baseman that moves Escobar to second.
Chris Bryant, y'all.
Chris Bryant.
Yeah.
Or if we find someone that we want at second base more than Marte, and that keeps him out in center field. And I don't think that's likely. Someone that I potentially see as someone that would be super great to get is basically probably impossible to get would be Whit Merrifield.
Oh.
That dude makes only like $4 million a year, and he's 3 years left on his contract. He plays a pretty decent second base. He is an offensive powerhouse as far as like leadoff hitters go. He hits for great average. He's led the league in hits the last 2 years. He's quick, and he is a good outfielder as well. Which, of course, we'd probably have to give up a lot to get Whit Merrifield. I'm not going to bank on that. However, the hopeful part of me, the dreamer inside of me, wants Whit Merrifield in Arizona,
Red.
in Sedona Red, and also teal.
Yeah, mostly the teal. Well, not mostly teal. It's got to have a good balance. Yeah, I think having someone like that would be fantastic. But more realistically, I think Ketel Marte.
Yeah.
Keeping him at second base.
That's the hope.
And he's already proven that he can be a great battery with Nick Ahmed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they've already proven to be a great team. And I think keeping Ketel there is the most beneficial idea.
Yeah, I agree. But of course, some backup infielders are going to be needed. Of course, some of our options right now, Ildemar Vargas, Domingo Leyba, of course, Josh Rojas, who's mostly played outfield for us, though he's a career second baseman, really. So potentially he'll end up getting some time on the infield. But someone I would propose we maybe try to give a chance, and we'll see what happens in spring training, is Andy Young. Andy Young came over in the Goldschmidt trade. He is... he's not fleet of foot necessarily, and not necessarily a great defensive player, but he's sort of a Brandon Drury type, kind of quite a bit of pop in the bat. In Reno last year, in only 68 games, he hit 21 homers, he hit 53 RBIs. His average was 280, which isn't super great, but his OPS was 984. So he is potentially a guy that sort of fills in similar role to what Wilmer Flores did last year and what Brandon Drury kind of did a couple years back, as a guy who maybe isn't necessarily the greatest defender, but you can put him in and count on him for a little bit of offensive production, especially if Marte has an off day or is in center field or at shortstop.
Absolutely. I think he would be a great player to keep an eye on in spring training.
They did put him on the 40-man roster to protect him from the Rule 5 draft.
That is great.
So Andy Young, look out for Andy Young in 2020. All right, moving on to left field. Now, it would be really easy to just skip left field and say, okay, David Peralta is going to play left field. He's a great left fielder.
Won a Gold Glove.
He won a Gold Glove, so he's obviously great defensively. And offensively, when he's healthy, he is one of the best Dimebacks and a very consistent and productive player. Freight Train is
a fan favorite.
Oh, yeah, he is. And not to mention, he's a clubhouse leader.
Yep. He's I'd say after Goldschmidt left, he became the emotional leader, at least on the bench, at least on the field.
Absolutely. So the only reason I could see David Peralta not playing left field is if they move him back to right field. And that will depend if they sign a free agent, which, spoilers, I think it's somewhat likely they sign a corner outfielder this offseason. And there's potential that they move Peralta back to right. He is good in right, and he was good in right before, but I think he's slowed down quite a bit since he was playing right field. And I don't know if his speed will play very well in right field at this point.
Yeah.
It'll depend.
I think keeping him in left field is probably for the best, especially if we get for right field a good defensive player. Some of the people on the free agent market for right field and for the outfield in general are great with the bat, but not the ones that you want to see in the field as much. But I'd say it would all depend. Now, are we talking about free agents?
Kind of. First, I want to talk about two free agents that were on the Dimebacks this year, and that's one. The first one's Adam Jones.
Okay.
Yay or nay? Do you think we re-sign him?
How much? Do you know how much he would cost us?
I'm not sure what his projected is right now. But I mean, he made what, $4 million last year, probably
Something like
making
that.
something. And it seemed he's made it sound like he's willing to take a discount to stay with the Diamondbacks.
Yeah, and he seems to like the Diamondbacks, and he seems to be regarded as an emotional leader on the Diamondbacks also, which I think is great. I liked Adam Jones.
I can respect that.
I respect Adam
Yes.
Jones, but overall, statistically speaking, he didn't play that great.
Yeah, if you look at his baseball reference stats, and of course, metrics aren't perfect, but his WAR was negative 0.4. His OPS plus was 87, which is 13 points below league average for his position. Even despite hitting 16 home runs, 67 RBIs, isn't that bad for having 485 at bats. For an outfielder, especially for a corner outfielder, you expect more production than that. Similarly, I personally feel the same way about Gerard Dyson, who is currently a free agent. Gerard Dyson has done some good stuff for us the last couple of years. He's made some of the best catches in the MLB.
Oh, absolutely.
He's clearly still a plus defender, and he's fast, and he's not been particularly productive with the bat, despite hitting, I think, a career-high home run last year, with 5 home runs last year, which I think is his career high, which has nothing to do with the juice ball, I'm sure. I don't think re-signing him makes sense for one really big reason, which is Timmy Lowe.
We have Timmy Lowe.
We have Timmy LeCastro, who...
The man can steal first base, if foolish baseball is to be believed.
Tim LeCastro is an anomaly of a player. I'm not going to spoil baseball bits. Go check out Foolish Baseball's video on Tim LeCastro if you have not. If you're a Diamondbacks fan especially and you want to smile a lot because someone's actually talking about the Diamondbacks, go check out that video about Tim LeCastro. It's pretty great. But Tim LeCastro, to me, is clearly going to be one of our backup outfielders next year. I think that would be fantastic if that's the role he took. That's my personal opinion. What's your opinion on what his role could be next year?
I think having him as a fourth outfielder is a perfect role for him. I don't think he's quite productive enough to be a starter, but that could change. We don't know. He's never gotten a chance to start consistently in the MLB. But I think having him as a fourth outfielder, having him ready to play if someone gets hurt, and having him there to pinch run, and he seems to be pretty clutch. He had 3 walk-offs just in 2019.
Not to mention he is a plus defender. Plus maybe. We haven't really seen yet, but he's probably plus defender. He's a great defensive replacement late in the games.
Yep.
A great pinch runner.
Great pinch hitter.
He gets on base. Tim LeCastro could be a very productive player, especially in that type of role. The other player who could end up being in that role next year, and he got to see a little bit of that role last year, was Josh Rojas, who came over in the Greinke trade. To counter Tim LeCastro, he's a lefty bat.
Yep. He seems to have a power bat to some extent.
He's versatile in the field. He didn't have great production, but it's also really hard to say how he's going to project. I think he's going to be 25 next year, or next year will be his 25-year-old season, I believe.
Yep.
So Josh Rojas, I think that's kind of my argument against Jones and Dyson is LeCastro Rojas. To me, makes a lot of sense in those kind of 4th and 5th utility outfielder roles.
Absolutely. But that's 4th and 5th. We still need to get our starters.
Yeah.
Who, if you're the Diamondbacks, and it's not just our thinking that we think that the outfield is the most important. I read an article about what every team needs the most, and it said outfield help for the Diamondbacks.
Yeah, I've seen a few. There's a lot of baseball writers talking about what the Diamondbacks should do in the outfield. There's obviously a ton of corner outfielders that are potentially available, and a lot of people are expecting the Diamondbacks to sign one of them. But I want to actually talk about Shogo Akiyama, I hope I'm saying that right, who is a free agent out of Japan, I think he's going to be playing his 32-year-old season, but he's a center fielder who, in 678 plate appearances, his slash line was 303 average, 392 OB on base percentage, 471 slugging with 20 homers and 12 steals. The 2 seasons before were a little bit more productive for him, so he's probably on a slight decline, but
He has been playing since 2011.
But he has been a very productive player for quite a while. But unfortunately, and this is something I actually didn't even realize until I was doing a little bit of research for this podcast, it says right at the end of this article that actually right now he's hurt. And that's something that could hurt him. He has a broken bone in his right foot that he got in an exhibition game. And so it's probably going to hurt his value a little bit. But it could actually mean for the Diamondbacks, if they do decide to go after him, that he ends up being a little cheaper than other options at the position. And considering the weakness in center field right now, I mean, the top 2 center fielders right now are Dyson and Billy Hamilton that are free agents in the MLB. He could be a pretty decent bat out of center field. So I'm going to go through... This is just a list of free agents, and I'm going to talk about them a little bit. They're all corner outfielders. They're all potential options. I don't know how much they're going to be worth for sure, but we can try to figure out what we think. And I'm going to first just say their names individually, and I'm going to see what you think, and then I'm going to show you what their stats are.
Okay.
So you might not know these guys super well.
I'll probably know most of them.
But they're all free agents. So, and some of these guys also might include moving Peralta to right field, but all these guys could probably play right field.
Okay.
So my first name is Corey Dickerson.
I like it. I mean, I already have opinions about Corey Dickerson. I think he has good potential.
Yeah, Corey Dickerson has kind of low-key raked for like kind of a while. He's played since 2013, and his career average is 286. His career OPS plus is 119. He's had 2,700 at-bats, too.
So that's not a small sample size.
And that's not even a small sample size. He's proven that he can hit. He's a lefty bat. He's mostly played left field, but he's a Gold Glover, so he has defensive ability. So, potentially even moving him to right, he probably could make the move. Last year, he was hurt for a bit. He had a foot injury, but he still hit 304. He had 12 homers. He had 59 RBIs. His OPS plus was 131. His OPS was 906.
Yeah, he killed it. He killed it last
he pretty much killed it.
And it was a short season.
And he was traded to the Phillies partway through at the deadline. And so the Phillies are probably going to still be trying to get him. And I'm sure there's a bunch of teams that are going to be trying to get him just because he hasn't been productive enough that he's going to fetch a huge sum. But he is also kind of a hot commodity because most of these players are not good average hitters. And Corey Dickerson is a good average hitter. I think, personally, he's my number one option of these guys.
I agree. I think he's the number one option if possible.
For picking up a free agent, he would be great. Again, though, there's going to be a lot of people going after him. Next on my list, Marcell Ozuna. What's your initial thought on Marcell Ozuna?
I wouldn't be totally against it. I think he'd be expensive. Very expensive. That's my
How expensive do you think Marcell Ozuna will be? Or how much do you think would be worth it? He turned down the qualifying offer.
Yeah. What was the qualifying offer?
It's like 18 mil.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking.
I don't think he's gonna fetch that much.
I don't think exactly. Well, what team was he on?
He was on the Cardinals.
Cards. Interesting.
So, Marcell Ozuna has made a downturn in the last 2 years compared to 2017.
Yeah.
But he's still been pretty productive the last couple seasons. Last year he hit 241 average, but he had 89 RBIs, 29 home runs. His OPS was 800, and his OPS plus was 107. But the year before, he played more games. He played 20 more games. He played 148, and he batted 280. He had 23 home runs, 88 RBIs, and his OPS was a little bit lower, 758, and his OPS plus though was 106. Now, of course, the year before he was
Unstoppable.
He was unstoppable.
He was an all-star. He won a Gold Glove and a Silver Slugger.
He had MVP votes. He has not gotten back to form, but he is a potential guy that we could get. Personally, he's a little bit lower on my list, especially because I agree. I think he's going to make a little bit more money. Last year he made 12.25 mil, and he turned down the qualifying offer. So I think he thinks he can get a longer term deal. He could be productive, but
I don't. Yeah, my issue with Ozuna is not his productivity possibility, because I think he would. I think he would be a good outfielder for the Diamondbacks. I just don't. I'm not convinced by what I've seen that he will be worth the amount of money he's fetching. Because again, we've already said it's not a great free agent class. So lower level free agents will fetch, in my opinion, more than they're worth. And especially someone, I think that is probably why Ozuna purposefully turned down his qualifying offer. I think he realizes that it's not a great free agent class and he can get more than he's worth.
Yeah,
at least in my books. And now we do have space. Because of the Greinke trade, the Diamondbacks have space to sign someone like this. Yeah. I don't know if he's the person we should sign.
The main reason I even bring up Ozuna is just because he has been... The Diamondbacks are one of the 5 teams rumored to have shown interest. So that's why I bring it up. I'm not completely sold on it. Another option, Cole Calhoun. What do you know about Cole Calhoun?
I know I used to play as him in a baseball video game. He seems to be a power-hitting lefty. Doesn't seem to be amazing in the field. Not terrible, though.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, Cole Calhoun will be coming over from the Angels. He's going to be playing his age 32 season next year.
Okay.
But he has been pretty productive over the course of his career. He has a pretty low OPS. Career is 747, and his OPS last year was 792. But he had 33 homers last year, 74 RBIs. Again, sort of like Marcell Ozuna, where of course they'll be productive. He's going to come in probably quite a bit cheaper than Ozuna will.
I'm sure he will.
Again, this is another person who I've seen some people bring up as a potential signing, though I'm not completely sold on it. He does have a Gold Glove, so he does have some outfield, some defensive prowess to be sure. But again, I'm not totally sold on Calhoun.
Yeah, I'm not either.
He would be sort of similar to getting a guy like Steven Souza Jr., honestly.
Yeah, kind of like a lefty Steven Souza. I wouldn't be completely opposed to him, but I don't think he's necessarily the correct fit.
If we sign to a very short-term deal, 1 year or 2 years, I wouldn't be super sad about that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be upset about it. I don't think he's a good long-term solution for us, but you never know. I wouldn't be upset about it.
All right. So now for another option that I like a lot. What do you think of Avasai Garcia?
I don't know much about him, I'll be honest.
I didn't either. So a lot of Rays are basically unknown players, and Avasai Garcia is another one, and who has actually put up pretty decent numbers very quietly in Tampa Bay. Now, he only had 489 at-bats last year, but he batted .282, he had 20 homers, 72 RBIs. His OPS was only 796, but his OPS was 111, or his OPS plus was 111, and he is only going to be 28 at the beginning of next season. So he's pretty young, and I'd imagine he's not going to fetch a hefty price. He's a righty bat. He's primarily played right field, and he's put together some pretty good numbers over the last 7-8 years on a couple different teams. A handful of years in Detroit, or a handful of years in Chicago on the White Sox, and he started out his career in Detroit. He's put together a pretty productive career already as a slightly above average hitting right fielder.
Yeah, he seems to be, based on what I see, a little bit inconsistent. Like some of these years he's batted great, and others he's batted a little bit less great. But his overall statistically, he's been pretty solid. I think, especially if we can get him for a pretty low price, I think he could be our solution.
Now, of course, Tampa Bay, as far as I know, is pursuing him, trying to get him back. And so I think he's going to be kind of similar to Corey Dickerson in the sense that there's probably going to be a handful of teams that are looking for a guy like him. Seems like a pretty consistently good offensive player, pretty low risk offensively. So yeah, I think Garcia is someone we should go after. And I've seen a few people on Reddit brought him up. That's actually how that's why I added him to this list. I saw a few people on Reddit talking about him, and I think he is a potential option. Now, I'm not going to be talking about Nick Castellanos. He's a guy that, unless you want to say anything about him, I think he's going to get the biggest contract of any outfielder this offseason. I don't think the Diamondbacks are going to really pursue him. He was very good last year and has a ton of potential to be incredibly good, but he's also a Scott Boras client. He's going to be fetching a hefty price.
He's also not great in the field from what I've seen.
That is, that's kind of the consensus. He's improved, but is probably more of a, definitely a negative defender.
Yeah.
So Nick Castellanos, I don't think is a great option.
Yeah, I don't find it to be likely that he would end up on the backs.
All right, now you can see my notes.
I see the next name on his list, and I already don't like it.
So you already are. This is a controversial opinion, it's controversial player in general, but also incredibly controversial
especially
for
the
fans.
Diamondbacks. Yeah.
Now I've seen a lot of people, surprisingly, a lot of people on Reddit and even some people on Twitter saying that they are potentially open to this player. And that player is Yasiel Puig. Jake the Snake, your sigh, I think that tells it all. You're not a huge Puig fan.
Absolutely not. Now, I'll start by throwing Yasiel Puig a bone. He seemed like he's improved a little bit. Like, he seems to have a better reputation now than he did maybe, let's say, 3-4 years ago when he probably had his worst reputation. I wouldn't even say I'm personally against him being on the Diamondbacks. I just think because of his history with the Diamondbacks, his history of being on the Dodgers, and we know what happens to Dodgers players who go to the DBacks and vice versa. There tends to be a lot of fans don't seem to accept it, and especially with Yasiel Puig being such a controversial character, I think it makes picking him up risky, especially if he ends up not playing as well as he could.
Yeah, I've seen a few people, like I said, bring up Puig as a potential, and I've seen a few articles drop Diamondbacks as a potential landing spot. I don't think it's super likely. To me, the most likely landing spot right now looks like the White Sox. But let's just pull up his stats. Just see how he's been the last couple of years. Now, last year wasn't super great. Now he signed with the Reds, and his bWAR for the year was 1.3. He batted 267. He had 84 RBIs. He had 24 homers. His OPS plus was an even 100. So he's
exactly average.
Last year he was pretty much exactly league average. I expect him to fetch probably more than he's worth this offseason. Again, same reason why Marcell Ozuna will probably get a pretty big payday. I don't know if he gets quite as much as Ozuna, just because he didn't have a great year last year, despite putting up career high RBIs, and almost, not career high home runs. Puig, like you say, his reputation, I think, precedes him a little bit, especially for Diamondbacks fans, and especially for baseball fans who maybe don't look so deeply into the stats. I mean, his career OPS plus is 122. His career OPS is only 823, though. He's a defensive right fielder. He's got a great arm. But though he's matured in the last couple years, I also agree. Don't see him as a great fit.
Not for the Diamondbacks.
Not on the Diamondbacks.
I agree.
Yeah. So overall, my hope for right field is Corey Dickerson.
Absolutely. He'd be my number one.
Avasaya Garcia, another good option, I think, if we can maybe sneak him away from the Rays. He could be productive, and he seems like also like a pretty likable guy, I think.
Yeah.
So could be a good right fielder for the Diamondbacks.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that is pretty much all we had planned to talk about today here on Sneks on Deck. Any closing words, Jake the Snake?
Just that I have a lot of hope for the 2020 season for the Diamondbacks. I think with Cattell and Eduardo having their breakout seasons, and with the amount of cap space and the amount of young pitchers and players that we have, I have a lot of hope for the Diamondbacks. I'm not going to say I think we will, but I think we have a definitive chance of pulling out a wild card this next season.
Yeah, I think that's probably our goal for the season. We clearly have the talent if our starting pitching can be consistent,
and of course, barring from a horrific injury of one of our huge players.
Yeah, as long as our offense, of course, even puts up similar numbers to last year, and especially if we can make an upgrade or two in the outfield,
Absolutely.
I think the Diamondbacks have a pretty sturdy chance of adding a couple wins next year and making a real push for the wild card. Stretch goal, of course, as always, is beating the Dodgers. I don't see it happening. The Dodgers just have a ridiculous amount of talent and are probably, because of their disappointing last couple off seasons or their last couple postseasons, are probably going to be adding a couple sturdy pieces.
Yeah.
Beat LA.
Yeah.
Hazen we trust.
And no soap on Snack.